All righty. I think we are live streaming now. Let me see if this worked.
Live streaming.
That's what it says. Yep, here we go.
Okay, we're
Here we
live.
go. All
Live
right,
with
so we have
Congressman Brian
a
Mast.
we got a VIP guest here today. So important, in fact, that we are skipping over our beer selection for Cinco de Mayo. We went straight to the Modelo. Congressman, what do you have?
Goose Island for me today.
Chris,
Goose Island.
there we go.
Maker's Mark.
Nice. Well, yeah, we're coroned out, so we could not do that for Cinco de Mayo. Going a different route today. We're doing the Modelo. It's one of my favorite Mexican beers anyway, so it was an easy choice. But
All right.
well, thanks for joining us tonight here. I think this is probably going to be one of our most viewed happy hours we've had so far. I know we've had a lot of interest in this just in the last hour or so. A lot of people reaching out and saying they're going to be tuning in. So thank you very much for being on here with us. And we've got a really exciting topic to talk about tonight, and a very important topic, I should say, which is the lake regulation schedule. And I think that most of our supporters know you pretty well, just because this is your number one issue over there in Stewart. And you talk about water more than anything else, I think. So it's great to have you on here, and have this conversation about what's so important with what's going on up there in Washington right now.
No, and right. Before we get into that stuff, Congressman Mast, give some of the people tuned in who might not be as familiar just a little history on yourself, your service, and kind of why you fight so hard for our waters.
Yeah, how'd you end up as our representative from the 18th Congressional District? Tell everybody, kind of up to that point.
Well, I guess the short version was I wasn't going to be able to disarm bombs anymore. I was a bomb technician in the U.S. Army, worked over at JSOC, loved doing it, was going to do it for 20 or 30 years. I got injured back in 2010. And after that injury, I'm sitting there laying in a hospital bed trying to figure out, where's my next battlefield? Where's the next place that I can go to fight? And I decided that, maybe my community would have me in a battlefield of words and ideas and legislation as their member of Congress, and kind of became this 5-year effort to go out there and pursue that opportunity to say, community, will you let me go fight? And I made the promise that if you do, I'll do it the only way that I've ever done it, which is the same way I did it in combat. And that's with every single thing that I have, no holds barred, going out there and just laying it all on the line. And you touched off and said, water is a big thing that I work on. It's the biggest thing that I work on. 2 things, water and veterans. Those are the biggest things every single day for me. And a lot of being able to be in the fight anywhere, whether you're in combat or somewhere else, it's being on the right battlefield. And so my number one ask when I was elected in the beginning as a member of Congress was to say, will you put me on the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure and the subcommittees that deal with water? Those subcommittees are Water Resources and Environment and Coast Guard and Maritime. And I sit on that committee and both of those subcommittees by design, so that water can be the number one thing that I go out there and work on every day, because it matters to everybody in my community and yours.
That it does.
Yeah, and thank you for your service, and thank you for taking up this fight for clean water for us. It's great to have people up there representing us that care about this issue and really understand how all these different things work.
Good. There's a lot of pieces to it. There's no doubt, from north of Lake Okeechobee all the way down to the tip of the Keys. There's a lot of things to pay attention to.
Certainly is, and it's good to have someone up there fighting with their constituents' best interests in mind. It's refreshing to see, so we definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, it can be difficult sometimes to figure out, what's best for your constituents as a member of Congress. You got folks that live more, more of an urban lifestyle. You got folks that live on the water. You got folks that maybe don't live on the water, but just love to recreate on it. Some on saltwater, some over on Lake Okeechobee, some that like to go out there in swamp buggies and other recreational activities out there. Some that are in agriculture, some that have never grown a thing in their life. And so everybody has different interests. But that's the hard part in Florida, is being able to marry all of those interests. But we haven't reached that. We've gone in the wrong directions sometimes. And I think in a lot of places we're headed in the right directions, with some folks that throw some challenges in there along the way.
I think we'll get to talk about some of those challenges here this evening.
Yeah, and before we get any further, I think we got about 90 or 100 people on here watching right now. This is going to be one of the most important things that we talk about. Of any of these happy hours we've done, this issue of what's going on in Washington with water management right now, and how these phrases that are being pushed to be part of our water bill are going to trickle down and affect us in pretty drastic ways. And Congressman Mast has been really leading the opposition and fighting very hard to make sure that we don't get put at a disadvantage. So please, we got 100 people on here now, over 100 people on. Please hit the share button on this one. There's a little thing you can start a watch party. Do whatever you can. We need to get a bunch of people paying attention to this, because it's really important that we're able to take action and neutralize this threat, so we don't end up slipping backwards. Congressman Mast has really been tireless on his dedication to the water issues, and there's a huge threat right now that we're going to talk about. And the more people that we can educate on this, get involved with this, there's things we can do right now to help it. And oh, great. Yeah, a bunch of people are sharing it. I see that. Yeah, or get a bunch more viewers now. So let's jump right into it. If you haven't already, share it again, and tag some of your friends. Get them tuned into this. So with that, what happened? What's going on now? Yeah, besides the fact that Chris's dog is upset.
Yeah, is that his Chihuahua? Is that what I hear?
This one's not the Chihuahua.
So, hey, no, there's a really big issue going on right now. So there's a bill that occurs in Congress every 2-3 years, something on that average, and it's what's known as the Water Resources and Development Act. And that is a bill that affects water policy and water infrastructure across the entire United States of America. Anywhere that the Corps of Engineers does work in a U.S. territory like Puerto Rico or Guam or somewhere else, anywhere, this bill affects water policy. This is where a couple of years ago I wrote an amendment in there to say, let's approve federally the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir, the EAA reservoir. In the same bill a couple of years ago, that's where I wrote the demand in there to say, you know what, Corps of Engineers has to redo what they called the Lake Okeechobee Regulation Schedule. Now they're calling it, or the new schedule is going to be called Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual. They need to redo that, right? This is a major bill for water policy, the biggest bill for water policy that goes on in the House of Representatives and the Senate and gets signed into into law by the president. So in this bill, there's a representative a little bit south of me, a little bit southwest of me, Alcee Hastings. And Alcee Hastings wrote a letter recently to other members and to the Corps of Engineers and other entities saying, listen, in this next Water Resources and Development Act, what we want to have put in there, or what he wants to have put in there, is that the savings clause, what's known as the SERP savings clause, is going to apply to the new regulation schedule, what I said is known as Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual. Now, there's some really big reasons why that's a problem, but before we get into all those problems, let me pull up my phone here. And the savings clause is very short, so I'll read it because it's important for people to understand what it is. Because if you read it, you might say, well, that doesn't sound too bad. That doesn't necessarily sound like a bad thing. So let me read it for you. Savings clause is this, right? I'll paraphrase a little bit of it. No elimination or transfer until a new source of water supply of comparable quantity and quality as that available on the date of enactment of this available to replace water to be lost as a result of implementation of the plan, the SERP plan. That's what they're talking about here back in 2000. This is when this savings clause came about, was back prior to 2000, right? The secretary and non-federal sponsors shall not eliminate or transfer existing legal sources of water, including, and this is where the important parts come in, those for agricultural or urban water supply. Those are both important things. Seems like, yeah, this seems common sense. Allocation or entitlement to the Seminole Indian Tribe of Florida under Section 7 of the Seminole Indian Land Claims Settlement Act of 1987. Seems reasonable. The Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida, water supply for the Everglades National Park. We care about that one, right? And water supply for fish and wildlife. And then goes beyond that to say implementation of the plan shall not reduce levels of service for flood protection. And then talks about no effect on the tribal compact. So you might read that savings clause and say, what's wrong with that? Doesn't seem like anything wrong with that. Well, let's go back to when was that enacted? Pre-2000. Right? So think about everything that was in the system in water management pre-2000. We can name a number of different things. Number one, all of the folks that are watching that are taxpayers that have been paying taxes in to say raise up the Tamiami Trail so that more water could flow into the Everglades. That wasn't done back at that point like it's done today, right? All those folks that have been paying in taxes to say, let's get modified water delivery in place and all those infrastructure projects going on. That wasn't the same water allotment to go to the Everglades as what could flow to the Everglades now because of all the infrastructure in place. Back at that time in 2000, the population of Florida was probably somewhere closer to 15 million people. Today, we're probably somewhere, 21.5 million people, maybe beyond that. So the drinking water supply needs today are totally different than the drinking water supply needs back in 2000, right? Or let's say some of the things that the Corps of Engineers and the EPA has come up with, right? The EPA this last year, they came out and said, you know what? If there's water that has greater than 8 parts per billion microcystin in it, if you're a human being, don't touch that. Don't come in contact with it because that's really bad for you. The EPA came out with this standard. That didn't exist back in 2000, or the Corps of Engineers acknowledging that they've discharged toxic water to our coast. That didn't exist. So if you say, okay, let's insert in a bill today in 2020 that the water allocations will be the same water allocations as pre-2000, that's why it's such a bad thing. Because those water allocations were the same allocations that left the Everglades dry, that left a situation in place where the Herbert Hoover Dike was so at risk that the Corps of Engineers ended up having to deviate from the policy that they're advocating to go back to. U.S. Sugar is advocating to go back to. Alcee Hastings is advocating to go back to. They had to deviate from that because it presented so much risk to the communities around the lake. And then we saw all this toxic discharges, right, that our communities on the east and west coast are getting. So that's what they're really advocating for when they say implement the SERP savings clause into this WRDA Act of 2020 to say that it shall apply to the new lake regulation schedule. Now, there's one other important point here that really matters, and that's that the savings clause has never applied to any of the lake regulation schedules. It didn't apply to LORS. It shall not apply to LOSOM. They're trying to do that. The reason they're trying to do that is because the Corps of Engineers already told them, hey, this doesn't apply. There's no place for this. This hasn't applied. It's not going to apply in the future. So they're trying to circumvent the system and get Congress to steal the water for them. That's what's happening here.
Wow. Yeah. So, we Daniel and I were talking about this earlier today, and, LOSOM, or the new Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual, that's going through a process right now where there's public input from business owners, people like Daniel and I, our fishing guide buddies, restaurant owners, agricultural farmers, where there's a place for them to come, kind of plead their case. And thankfully for the operational flexibility that the Army Corps took, this past year or whatnot, where we saw a lot less discharges to our coast to your coast. We're seeing the effects of that. We have beautiful water quality right now. But if they were to circumvent this and be successful, would this like hamstring the Army Corps or limit them from kind of that flexibility? Or, I mean, what would be the effect there?
The effect of implementing this, let's take it on all of these different groups. Right now, let's back up and make an acknowledgement here. I'll make an acknowledgement for myself. I want agriculture folks to get all the water that they need, every drop of water that they need, right up to the point that it negatively affects other people. That's the limit, right? I want them to grow successfully, have successful businesses, but you can't have so much that you don't use it and you're keeping it in reserve on the lake to the point that the west coast of Florida can't get any beneficial wintertime discharges that you need for good water ecology, which has happened many years. Didn't happen, the last year because we got the Corps to go out there and work with us and give those beneficial discharges. They can't keep so much that there's so much left on the lake during hurricane season where predictably we get a lot of rain that they have to dump, billions of gallons of water in just a short couple weeks on the East Coast and on the West Coast of Florida because they kept so much water on the lake, right? That's the limiting point. I want ag and everybody to get all the water that they need, but there's a limit, and that limit is when you're hurting somebody else as a result of that policy. And as of right now, through the policy that's existed previously, you can count on these major discharges about 3 out of every 4 years, 9 of the last 12 years, basically. This is what's occurred. So what happens if U.S. Sugar and Representative Alcee Hastings, and those that are pushing this are successful in getting the SERP savings clause implemented into the new regulation schedule LOSOM? So let's take urban people. Say somebody that lives in West Palm Beach, an urban area, an area that's grown quite a bit, or the city of Port St. Lucie here, both areas in my area. They're cities that have grown tremendously. Their water supply needs are totally different today than they were back in 2000. But that's, like I said, looking to lock them in to the water allocations from the year 2000 instead of letting the Corps look at it and say, this is what's needed today. The Everglades are locked into lower levels of water from what they were receiving back in 2000 instead of what new infrastructure is capable to send them today, which is what everybody's been paying for, right? That's one of the big things that gets hamstringed. We've been paying to build infrastructure so the Everglades can get more water. But if you write into policy that you can't send them anymore, then what good was all that infrastructure, right? These are the things that happens if you were to take that policy and put it in place. The Corps doesn't get to go out there and make any of those changes. That's where it becomes such a dangerous thing to put out there. Truthfully, I think it's stupidity to say, let's ignore the last 2 decades of science, of recognizing what the harms have been to the Everglades and to the coast and to everybody, to the communities around Lake Okeechobee that have put at risk. Let's ignore all of that and let's go back to just what we were doing 20 years ago because it benefited one special interest group. That doesn't make sense. That's stupidity, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's, to kind of add to that, I mean, I 100% agree with what you said there. But the fact that they're doing this with a simple 1-sentence statement that doesn't mean much to the average person. It's legalese. It's, talking about section 601(5)(h). It's like, to the average person, that statement, unless you're a lawyer who's working on Everglades policy, that means nothing to you. So the fact that they're trying to slip this in to the process up in Washington behind closed doors in the middle of a global pandemic is, that's what really pisses me off about this. It's the last couple of mornings I've been out on the water fishing here, which I haven't put my boat in the water in almost 3 years. And during quarantine, I've had a little more time, less travel. I've been out there on the water and it looks absolutely incredible. It looks better than last year. I haven't seen the water as clear as it is now, maybe in my lifetime here in Southwest Florida. And it shows that what we've done, and what you fought for as well with getting this operational flexibility for the Corps, that works. It works well. We've seen the results of it. Our businesses have prospered from the results of it, and they're trying to slip this in under the radar and terminology that doesn't make sense to anybody.
There are important questions that anybody arguing the other side, that to have a fair debate, they got to answer these questions, right? So I like to use last year as an example because it was a great example, right? We had a Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Dorian, literally headed directly to my house. I mean, that cone, had it not stopped over the Bahamas, which was very unfortunate for them, was headed right over my home, that eye of that storm. And in the face of a Category 5 hurricane, a monster, what's the one thing that the Corps of Engineers didn't have to worry about in that year? Because they will acknowledge there will be people that argue and say, well, the Corps didn't do anything to lower lake levels. No, they absolutely did. The Corps will tell you that they made a very specific effort to give the west coast of Florida the water they needed during the wintertime, to get more water into the Everglades, to get the lake to a lower level moving into hurricane season, so that if a storm did come, they would have more flexibility. Instead of it being right on the cusp, maybe they have an extra 6 inches or an extra foot or whatever, to say they have more buffer room from where they have to send out those toxic, harmful discharges that occur, with the summertime heat on the lake and everything else. And they were successful. They didn't have to discharge water in the face of a Category 5 hurricane, and everybody that needed water got the water that they need. Those are the questions that people have to answer. If you want the lake to be higher, how much higher did you want it in the face of Category 5 hurricane? An inch, 2 inches, 5 inches, a foot? Answer that question. How much higher did you want it? Because that's the main period of time we're talking about, is summertime hurricane time. And then can you tell me somebody that with this water policy change that the Corps undertook last year that didn't have their water supply needs met? Who is that was suffering as a result of last year's policy? And maybe there was somebody that I don't know about, and that should be included in the debate if there was. But I don't know of anybody yet that was suffering from that. And I want to make another point while we're talking about this. This was not the first time that U.S. Sugar has made this attempt to try to very sneakily insert themselves into policy in different ways like this. So number one, we had some lobbyists from U.S. Sugar Corporation that were on the board for this Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual. Nikki Fried appointed them as her representative agricultural commissioner. She denied that they were actually board members, and then ultimately she took them off, and she acknowledged that yes, they were board members put onto this, or representatives that were put onto this. It was not right. They were getting paid something like $35,000 out of the Land Acquisition Trust Fund in Florida, and paid untold millions from the U.S. sugar industry. So, you make the determination for yourself. Who do you think they're advocating for? The taxpayer or special interest group? So that was one place. It's so important to them that they be on that board that even after they got kicked off, they're now back onto it. I believe Hendry County hired them on now as their representatives to this board. So even though Nikki Fried kicked them off after having them on, they're now back onto the board. Whereas another place that they went out there and tried to affect the policy in this way. U.S. Sugar sued the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, saying basically that they don't want Lake Okeechobee not one drop lower. And I'm not saying that as hyperbole. They don't want it one drop lower. Doesn't mean if having it a drop lower could protect the people that live around the lake that could be flooded in the face of a hurricane. Not one drop lower. Doesn't mean if bringing it a drop lower could mean they still get all the water that they need, but they don't have to dump billions of gallons on the coasts in the summertime, destroying the St. Lucie estuary and the Indian River Lagoon, and destroying everything over out the Caloosahatchee. Doesn't matter if lowering it an inch could do that. Not interested. That's the policy they're totally against. So there have been numerous places that they've been working in this direction, and this is just the next place. It's very sneaky, and it's very bad for people that like to be on the water, that want to see good water quality, that don't want to see discharges to the coast, that want to see urban drinking water supply met to the 2020 needs instead of the year 2000 needs. These are things that are all part of that.
Yeah, and that's, that lawsuit, if you're questioning what their intent is with this, I mean, it was as soon as that water started dropping in the springtime, they were slapped with that lawsuit. The U.S. Sugar filed it against the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It was something that absolutely benefited the the common good of Florida. That was something that was very much in the public interest. We all depend on clean water. Every single business down here depends on clean water. And action was taken by the Army Corps that helped us, and lawsuit. That was their response to it. So,
my dog's jumping up on me now. Sorry.
We had we had Dr. Van Lent on last night from Everglades Foundation to talk kind of about water use and how all these different things work. And one of the things he said was 50% of the water supply in Lake Okeechobee goes to sugar farms in the EAA. So that's a massive amount of water. Roughly half. I don't think the number is exactly 50%, but it's roughly half on an average year of that water, is for them, and their cost on it is a couple $100 a year for permits. That's it.
Let's unpack that a little bit more, what you're saying right now. Put some exact numbers on this, right? So when they measure water off of Lake Okeechobee, they measure it in a unit called MGY, which means million gallons per year. That's how they do the consumptive use permits. That's the permit that you got to go out there and ask for to say, I want some water off Lake Okeechobee. So 1 doesn't equal 1 gallon. 1 equals 1 million gallons. So agriculture I think I've given you a number from 2018, I think 2018. Agriculture in 2018, their consumptive use permit request was about 865,000 million gallons a year, right? So you do the math on that, nearly 1 trillion gallons of water off the lake, which is about 6 feet of water in depth on Lake Okeechobee, right? Every foot of water on the lake across the breadth of it is roughly 150 billion gallons of water. Some rough math on that. So roughly 6 feet of water. And quite often, they only use half of that supply. What they're asking for is just a whole bunch extra in the bank. And that's where that whole bunch extra in the bank really goes out there and hurts everybody, because that extra means somebody like the East Coast or the West Coast has to take it when a hurricane heads our way, or that the city of West Palm Beach or some other city, they're not allotted more water usage, even though their population has gone up, because these other folks have all of the consumptive use permits. I tell folks, it's like when I bring my kids to the restaurant, which none of us can really relate to right this minute, but we bring our kids to the restaurant, and they're like, yeah, I want 2 of these things. When daggone well, they're only going to eat 1. That's kind of what this situation is like. And it's just wrong. I wouldn't let it for my kids, and it's not a good situation here.
And, another good point there is when the Army Corps utilized that flexibility, lowering the lake in the dry season, which really benefited our river and gave us that added capacity coming into Hurricane Dorian. It was a classic example of when we would have received those discharges to both our coasts. They filed that lawsuit not as a result of them being shorted or denied any water. They didn't sue because they were damaged. They sued when they hadn't had any effect to their ability to water crops whatsoever.
No, let's go make another taxpayer-funded point here, right? So all of the taxpayers across Florida, back, I don't even know what year it was right offhand, but the South Florida Water Management District went out there and installed these forward pumps that allowed for water to be taken off Lake Okeechobee at a much lower level, right? Now, they did that so that if Lake Okeechobee got really low, they could still provide water to these users. They did it as a backstop so that they could still get that water out there, right? Now, that begs a couple of questions for when folks try to make the argument, say, agriculture is really just looking out for the health of the lake. They really just, it's just a magnanimous argument that they want to see the betterment of the lake for good science. Well, if they really just wanted to see the betterment of the lake, then you beg the question, why do they want these pumps that would still take water off the lake, even if the lake were really, really low. That would kind of make you scratch your head and say probably not exactly what they're saying there. But the point is, there is infrastructure to make sure the lake can give them water, even if it's lower. There was a time a couple of years back where there's a meeting that goes on in Washington every year. That's all the stakeholders of the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Task Force is what it's called. So you'll get the Corps of Engineers there, you'll get the tribes there, you'll get agriculture there, you'll get the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, everybody that's involved, you'll get them there. And one of the folks that was on that board was an old executive director of the South Florida Water Management District, Ernie Marks. And I was a witness essentially there, or somebody not there to question, but I posed some questions to, at that time, Executive Director Ernie Marks. And I said, listen, you tell me, at what point does the lake get too low that you're not going to meet those water supply needs for agriculture and for others? And he said, well, I couldn't give you an answer, right? He didn't want to be exact about it, but I pushed him on it. I said, well, what about if the lake's at, 12 feet? Can everybody still get their water? Yep, everybody can get their water. What about if the lake's at 11 feet? Can everybody still get their water? Yep, everybody can still get their water. And what about if the lake's at 10 feet? I'm not advocating that it be there, but I'm asking them, right? What if the lake's at 10 feet? Yeah, we'll still get everybody their water. What about 9 feet or 8 feet? Congressman, I suspect at any level that you ask, we're still going to make every effort to send every drop of water that we can to those users of it. And that was the executive director at the time of the Water Management District making that acknowledgement. And, I always go back to that video. It's one of the things
that would be a death blow to Lake Okeechobee. When it gets so low that the lake's ecology itself is dependent on it, yet you're still, we're still dishing out, 2,000 cubic feet per second to private industry.
But, and that goes to the biggest pet peeve argument that I have for myself is whether it's somebody on the old water management district board or somebody else that comes to me and says, well, listen, we're just advocating for what's good for Lake Okeechobee. Right. Now, the reason that's a pet peeve for me, I want what's good for Lake Okeechobee. But what folks are saying when they say that is I'm advocating for what's good for Lake Okeechobee, regardless of what it does to the St. Lucie or the Indian River Lagoon or to the Caloosahatchee or to the Everglades. Be damned what it does to those things. If it's good for Lake Okeechobee, then that's the science that I want to pay attention to. Don't worry about if it means sending harmful discharges out the east or the west coast. Don't worry about if it means not enough water gets to the Everglades. It's what's good for Lake Okeechobee. And that's why that is such a false argument. Probably one of the biggest pet peeves I have in my life is when that argument is made and somebody doesn't want to acknowledge that, managing what's good for Lake Okeechobee quite often means destroying several other ecosystems. It means that the west coast of Florida, you don't get the beneficial discharges that you need in the winter, and then you get a disgusting amount of discharges in the summer. And then the east coast of Florida, we get a disgusting amount in the summer, so much that it destroys our estuary, and the Everglades doesn't get what they need. If you want to look at the system, and this is the ask for me when the Corps of Engineers is looking at this policy, and I think this is, in my opinion, the big difference. I don't want to talk for everybody else. I'll say between myself and U.S. Sugar in this debate, right? I talked about U.S. Sugar and their lawsuit saying they don't want the lake not one drop lower, the effort to put folks on this, the effort to revert back to pre-2000 levels of management across the board by implementing the savings clause into the newest regulation schedule, right? And they're unwilling and every front to have any compromise with all of the other stakeholders around the lake. That's not my point of view. I don't know. I don't think it's your point of view either. Like I said, I want agriculture to have their water, but you have to be willing to acknowledge that the St. Lucie doesn't need those discharges, and it definitely doesn't need them when there's 8 parts per billion microcystin or disgusting harmful algal blooms. That you guys don't need 8,000 cubic feet per second of discharges in the summertime, but you know what? You do probably need at least 700 cubic feet per second in the winter and the summer. And if you're not getting that, that's the problem. And that the Everglades need this amount of minimum flows for good health going out there and then all the way out to Florida Bay. And if you're not willing to compromise and have both of those fronts be answered, and municipal drinking water supply and the compact for the tribes, then you're being unreasonable, because the fact is sugar doesn't own Florida. The people of Florida, have the rights to the water and the rain and the rivers and the lakes and the coasts and everything else, but it's being managed for one special interest. And that's where it's so wrong.
I couldn't have said it better myself right there. I mean, that's the exact problem that we're dealing with. And, I definitely give you a round of applause for that one. But, on that topic about, the lake management, people saying, we care about the health of the lake. Well, this exact measure that we're talking about would be terrible for the health of the lake, because it would cause lake levels to be higher. And that's the worst thing. It would tie the hands of the Army Corps from sending that water down to the Everglades, holding more in the lake. And there's some times when, a low lake can cause some harm to the lake, but nowhere near as bad as a high lake. When that lake is high, it kills everything. The water is so turbid in there. Once it gets, up over 15 and a half feet, it starts killing all that submerged aquatic vegetation, which is very critical to the health of the lake out there. So, whenever we start talking about this water supply issue, the sugar industry have fake groups. They have, paid off media, fake media outlets, whatever you want to call them. I mean, they've got it all. And they come after us. I mean, drawing cartoons of, Captains for Clean Water. And I think I've seen you featured in one, which is, a badge of honor, because, you're fighting special interests. Stuff like that happens. I mean, politics are dirty. I had no idea until we got involved with this. But, the threat of a high lake to the health of Lake Okeechobee is way high. I mean, I've duck hunted out there. I've bass fished out there, spent a lot of time on the lake looking around. And when that lake gets really high and everything dies, it's collapse. And it's the reason that our water coming to the Caloosahatchee is cleaner than the water you get to the St. Lucie, is because we have a healthy and robust marsh on the west side of the lake. And, that high water is terrible. So the fact that they're trying to use that as an argument is, it's a joke.
Yeah. And we're not talking about, managing the lake, way down in these low levels year round all the time. And what Daniel's talking about as far as high waters, if U.S. Sugars to have their way with this, we see the lake, as we did back in 2000, which they're trying to revert to, get up as high as, 17 feet. And without a doubt, that is terrible for the ecology of the lake, as well as a massive risk to the communities around
the Corps could now do at the point that they repaired the dike. They could bring the lake up to those higher levels without as much worry to the dike. That's the design of putting all that money into dike repairs, so that the Corps can have less worry about the levels on that lake. And that's a good thing. That's what everybody's paying for those dike repairs for. But what you're bringing about up is, well, what does that do to the health of the lake? If you're advocating for saying, okay, let's keep the lake at 15 feet, in June, and then we get a Cat 5 storm or two Cat 5 storm. Let's just take Hurricane Dorian. Say you get a storm that sits on us for 4 or 5 days, just dumping water. Now that lake's up at 17 feet, maybe more, and there's real risk again, right? We're talking about managing the lake in a way that is responsible all year round, but preparing for what we know comes every year, which is hurricane season. Preparing for that inevitability by making sure there's that much more buffer on the lake. And that much more buffer, I give this acknowledgement, it doesn't guarantee that there are no harmful discharges out the coast. That's not a guarantee. We could get 3 or 4 hurricanes in a season, and then you're just SOL. There's so much water in the system that it still has to happen. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't prepare for what has occurred 9 out of the last 12 years, which is there's way too much water in the system. And for agriculture, there is an inverse relationship to what is good for the rest of Florida in this system, because they're going out there and they're saying we want all this extra water kept in the system, but you know what? All their crops are thoroughly watered when there's a ton of water going on to Lake Okeechobee, which means the lake is filling up, but they don't necessarily need to take that water. So it is a little bit of an inverse relationship to them for what's good for everybody else. And that's part of what puts us at odds too.
That's a good point, because when the lake is filling up is also when agriculture is getting rain, so they don't need irrigation supply. They're relying on the rain. When the natural system is reliant on the water in the lake to maintain balance, and the Everglades needs it, which is in times of drought, like right now, is when they are relying on it. And we've seen that just literally just a few months ago. We got to where there wasn't water coming down the Caloosahatchee River to maintain that salinity balance, as you spoke of. We like to see around 700 cubic feet per second there, but there wasn't any water going out of Caloosahatchee, but there was still 2,000 cubic feet per second going to the EAA.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's priorities, right? That's what we're saying. You got to have this fairness in management where, number one, the biggest users of the water, which by far is agriculture, by far, the numbers don't even come close. They can't say they're going to be the biggest requester and user, but they're not going to be the ones that take it. The rest of us take it when there's too much in the system because they asked for too much, right? And then you're not going to be allowed to have it when you need it in the winter on the West Coast. And then I'm going to have to take it on the East Coast. But, oh, by the way, the Everglades and Florida Bay can't have it either because they're going to keep it in reserve. And, oh, by the way, this is one other point that we didn't talk about. They were also, and still to this moment, are the biggest opposition to the EAA reservoir. There's nobody that far harder against us getting the EAA reservoir over the line, even right up until this moment.
That's a really good point. We saw that for sure firsthand when Daniel and I first kind of got involved in this fight. It was pretty surprising, and that's a good point of this. Is the point of the EAA reservoir is to, one, take water from the lake to help reduce the discharges to our coasts, but two, the bigger point of the reservoir is to have a place that we can take water and deliver it to the Everglades in dry time. And anything reverting back to something in 2000 that didn't have these components of SERP put in place and manage our water based on a system that is different than it is today, it defies common sense, I guess.
That goes back to the same thing that we were just debating, though. It doesn't matter if the water is coming off the lake for the benefit of the Everglades or for the benefit of an urban area that needs drinking water supply or for the benefit of just getting it out of the system so that the East and the West Coast don't have to have it dumped on them in the summertime, or whether it's for the benefit of the Caloosahatchee in the winter. That one special interest is willing to do absolutely anything to prevent another drop of water from coming off that lake. That has been demonstrated time and time again. Like I said, whether it's the reservoir, whether it's their lawsuit, whether it's getting their folks onto this board for the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual, or whether it's today trying to get the savings clause with year 2000 management style, ignoring the last 2 decades of information that we all have in front of us and getting that put into the new management of Lake Okeechobee. Anything and everything that they can do to prevent a drop from coming off the lake, they will do it. Everybody else be damned. Basically giving a double barrel middle finger to the environment of Florida and to the citizens of Florida.
Yeah, very well said. And it's frustrating that, this is the way politics works, that they've continually, it's been the most surprising thing since we started Captains for Clean Water. Chris and I, the first time we got involved with this, we go up to Tallahassee, and I remember, going to grab dinner afterwards and thinking, if everybody just knew about this problem, then it would have been fixed already, especially if they had an understanding of what was at stake. But, when you're competing with special interest, it's nonstop. I mean, they have, environmental groups that as they call themselves, environmental groups that are, towing their same messaging line. They've got all these, news outlets that every time we object to anything they're doing, they fight this so hard, so aggressively hard. It's, people wonder where the term big sugar comes from. It's from their tactics that they employ. It's not just, I have no issue with any kind of farming. I eat a lot of food. You can tell that by looking at me. And I'm glad that we have food grown here in America and in Florida. I always try to buy local produce wherever possible, whether from, at the fruit stand up the street or my local grocery store. I always look for fresh from Florida logo. But when you're employing, PR firms, fake media outlets, all these different tactics to try to, manipulate messaging to intentionally cause harm to the public resource, from your benefit to it, that's the major issue that we have here. And, that's the reason that this problem has gone on for so long. It's the debate there is so often manipulated by political contributions that they put into it. And, all these, fake groups, and, I don't have proof that they're getting paid off because they do it through, 501c4 things where you can't follow the money. But, if every time we take action, when there's 8 or 10 of the same groups, a lot of them, no identities, no individuals associated with them. It's, Floridians for Clean Water, or, whatever the group is, they have their PR firms, come after and, attack everybody that's trying to help it. That's the major issue with this. They're absolutely not playing fair. They earn every bit of that big sugar name that gets thrown around.
I always believe, look, there's no such thing as a fair fight. So I like a good opposition, but we're all Floridians. We should want to see what's best for our state. The rain that comes out of the sky, our rivers, our tributaries, our lakes, our streams, our estuaries, our coastline, that's of the people. That's the why we live here, why we love this place, so that we can go enjoy it. And we've allowed it to be destroyed year after year because we are managing for one special interest, to the detriment of the coast, to the detriment of the Everglades, to the detriment of urban drinking water supply and everybody else. And that cannot continue. It's got to be time where people stand up and say, listen, it doesn't matter, if you've lived in Florida 100 days or 100 years. One of the great things about America is that we all have the same property rights, and we all deserve to have clean water regardless of where we live or how long you've been there.
Yeah,
damn straight.
Absolutely. Hey, we've got like close to 100 comments on here. I want to go through some of these. Want to give a quick shout out here to Holly Smith, councilwoman from City of Sanibel. The City of Sanibel, I think, is like the best example we have of a local government that's really standing up to special interest and fighting for what's good, and the interest of our economy here. The City of Sanibel has, every single one of their council members, Councilwoman Smith and Mayor Ruane have been very involved with this. The whole council has. But she was on here commenting. I think it's great that we're getting, in these happy hour conversations, local government officials, we're having, governing board members from Water Management District. We're getting a lot of people paying attention to this. And these are the important conversations that we have to carry through this quarantine, through this whole COVID situation. There's a new normal setting in, and the fact that we're all coming together, I'm really happy about that. We clearly saw a sneak attack happen under the threat, under this coronavirus, this quarantine pandemic. They were expecting us to all be paying attention to other things. People are worried about losing their jobs. They're worried about their health. They're worried about their families. And, it makes it really easy to just slip something in, really terrible, which is, what they were trying to do. So thanks, Holly. Thanks for, everybody that's tuning into these. It's really important.
Yeah, look, we've been asking the Corps of Engineers for a number of months, when we get the chance, hey, we want you to comment on the savings clause. We knew this was going to be a fight. We've been asking them to comment on it, and they have been out there. And the Corps of Engineers has made the acknowledgement that savings clause has never been a part of any lake regulation schedule, and it shouldn't be a part of this one in the future. And that's why they're trying to go around the Corps and get Congress to essentially steal that water for them.
Yeah, so, that's exactly what it is. They're stealing the water.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Congressman Mast, we were talking about this earlier, but we're putting this information out. We become aware of this type of thing happening, and obviously want to make the public aware of it so that they can have their voices heard, which we've been doing. And a lot of times it's like, well, where can we read this? Where can we see it? And that's exactly kind of the point. You can probably describe this a little better, but this is being done in a fashion that it's not in a, it's not in a bill. It's not done in a public forum where there's studies or presentations explaining it. It's being done behind the scenes on behalf of special interests, where you have representatives trying to garner support quietly to get this put in. Can you explain a little bit of the lack of transparency and the lack of paper tangible? Here's the where it's happening and how it's happening.
Yeah, well, one, there's an attempt to be sneaky, right? They're not going to go out there and say, listen, we want to take all the water so that the rest of you can't have it, even if it really sucks for you, right? That's not a good selling argument to go out there and make. It's essentially what's happening here. So they are trying to go behind the scenes. And like I said, one of the most recent ways is it started with Congressman Alcee Hastings going out there and writing a letter, and they're going to circulate that through the Florida delegation. Now, in Congress, when you're talking about a policy that matters for one specific region, right? The state of Florida right now is what we're talking about. It does matter, even if people aren't on the committee, it does matter what the representatives from that state have to say. That's my dog barking now. So it does matter what the representatives from the state have to say. So I would give this encouragement that hey, look, come here. Sit down. All right. He'll stay here maybe. Hey, wait down.
Which you know what? We got it. Brian, every time we do one of these, we have a cameo from my dog or Daniel's dog. So we need a cameo from your dog.
Halo. All right. Halo, come here. Up. There we go. Oh, he's going to pull me over. Halo, come here. Up. Up.
Yeah, look at that big guy.
Oh, he almost knocked over my beer. There wasn't much left in it. So I was going to make an encouragement right before Halo started barking. And that encouragement is this. Other members of the Florida delegation, that especially from the area, right? You got Francis Rooney on your side, or there's going to be somebody that's replacing him because he's not seeking re-election, right? You got Lois Frankel and Ted Deutsch, and Alcee Hastings already spoke up. You got Debbie Mercusel-Powell and Donna Shalala and Mario Diaz-Balart. And then to the north, you got Greg Stubbe and Darren Soto, Val Demings, a host of others. Write to those people and let them know where it is that you stand. Call their offices and let them know. Call the people that you know that live in their communities and make sure that they reach out to their representatives to say, listen, if there's a letter going around saying that Florida wants the savings clause from 2000 to govern Florida's water policy of 2020, you better not be on that, because that seems idiotic. Or, we'd like you to advocate for fairness across the whole system where, yeah, we want agriculture to get their water because we're proud of Florida farmers and Florida produce and citrus and everything else that exists out there. But it can't be to the point that it's harming the community. That would be like saying, well, listen, we're going to give all the restaurants on the water all the leeway that they need so that they can have successful businesses, even if it means they can go out there and dump their fryers out into the lagoons that their restaurants sit on top of, and they can dump, because it's more convenient. Let's let them dump their garbage in the water and things like that. It would just make things, that can't be the case. You can't have policy that only benefits one group but hurts the other. And that's the ask. Go out there and write and call these other representatives, or if you know people in their communities, ask them to write and call them and say, no, this is not the policy for the people of Florida. If you're advocating for that, you're advocating for policy for a special interest in Florida, and that is totally different.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what we've been doing at Captains for Clean Water. We've had I think we're 4,500 of our members have sent emails to their member of Congress on this issue specifically, And, we've had people all across the country participate in this. So we're even kind of giving a heads up to, those members outside of Florida, hey, if this makes it in or makes it to the T&I committee, make sure you're killing this. I mean, this needs to be, dead on arrival. And people are really, upset about this and they're taking action, which is great. But, something you can do right now, I saw Debbie Culp, Chris Peterson on here in the comments saying, share this out now. That's exactly, the most important thing. If you go to the Captains for Clean Water Facebook page, there's a video on there, urgent call to action. You click it, it takes 1 minute, and you can send a message to your legislator. I would even recommend go a step above that. Send them another personal email or a phone call. We need to just keep up with this. This is probably one of the most critical things we've dealt with since the existence of Captains for Clean Water. In the last 4.5 years, this is absolutely critical. And we have it in our comments here. Click that button. There's 120 people watching this now. Click that, share it. If everybody gets a couple more people, that's extremely impactful. We have to speak up on this. We've dropped everything we're doing at our organization now and are focusing 100% of our efforts onto, answering questions people are having with this, making it easier for you to contact your policymaker. It is very critical. If we're not the organization that sends you an email every month saying, hey, this is extremely important, send this email, donate, whatever. That's not Captains for Clean Water. We wait until there's an issue that is actually extremely important. This is it. We wouldn't be asking you to do this if we didn't absolutely need you to. It's super easy. Click that link, 1 minute, and you're done.
Yeah,
I want to go up here in the comments. I saw Sean Riordan. He's a captain over on the East Coast. He asked what percentage of the agriculture water goes to U.S. sugar and what goes to the other crops. So I can't answer that exactly, but something we were talking about earlier, and we talked last night with Dr. Van Lant, who's a hydrologist on this issue. About half of the water in Lake Okeechobee that's used for water supply is for the EAA. 95% of that EAA is sugarcane. So you're talking about, sugarcane itself as a crop is the number one water user we have in South Florida. So, I can't tell you, specifically, which company or anything like that, but it's the vast majority. Well, I shouldn't say the vast majority. It's far greater than any other single water user in the system. So, roughly half, almost half the water that's given out as water supply, is for sugarcane. I think we had some other.
Go
ahead, Chris.
That note also, this is, make no mistake, people watching of how this isn't something that, agriculture in general, the small farmers, this isn't something that they've, strategically fought to put into place. This is an effort coming from industrial sugarcane agriculture, leveraging, their chips in the political system to push this through. The way that industrial sugar operates is not remotely the same as the way that the other parts of agriculture operate throughout the state of Florida. So this is not a water versus agriculture versus water argument. This is big sugar, and as we talked earlier, why they have earned that title, going about their antics, which is similar to a lot of the tactics we saw around the tobacco industry, which were referred to as big tobacco. They use whatever means necessary to get the best outcome for them, regardless of the cost to everybody else.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of comments in here about Florida Bay and the Everglades. I saw Captain Mike Holliday, who's actually from Congressman's district. He's one of the top captains over in Stewart. I saw Benny Blanco, Troy Brown, who's an incredible advocate for our water stuff. Benny was on here, Captain Benny Blanco, saying refractometers reading at 38 parts per thousand today in Florida Bay. So the salinity today in Florida Bay, measured by fishing guides out there, were over the salinity level of seawater. And we have water in Lake Okeechobee now, and none of it is flowing under the bridges down to the Everglades. So that's a specific example of a action being taken or not being taken of sending them that water that they desperately need right now. So that's a water loser that's already losing now. And under this provision we're talking about, they would be losing even more.
And so, you're paying for the infrastructure, or you paid for the infrastructure already to get that water to those places that need that water. But it's the policy side of it right now that's being argued, saying, nah, we're not going to allow that water to go there. We're not going to have a fair system where we look out for Florida's environment to the south and Florida's environment to the Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie. And look, we didn't talk about it, but there's a number of other things that we could get into, such as, spraying or things that come in from the Kissimmee River, onto Lake Okeechobee. Those are other conversations too. But right now, our conversation has been about, listen, where are you going to put that water and when are you going to put that water? And you have to make sure that it's fair for everybody. That's the point. It's got to be fair for everybody. That's the difference. We're asking for compromise for everybody to not be hurt versus giving one group everything that they want and figuring out the ways that you have to step on everybody else in order to do it.
That is exactly the point. And Congressman Mast, you mentioned the spraying issue, and this comes back to, we talk about the health of Lake Okeechobee and our concerns there, and we don't have time to dive into deep conversation about that. But the fact of the matter is, we're concerned with the health of our ecosystems as a whole. It's a giant interconnected ecosystem, and when one part of it suffers, the other parts suffer. And the spraying is one of those issues that drastically affects the ecology and the health of not only Lake Okeechobee, but many of our freshwater rivers and lakes across the state of Florida. And it's something that needs real attention to reform. One, what role we see plants and aquatic vegetation playing in these lakes, whether they're non-native or not, but what the ideal lake, how can we make these lakes as healthy as we possibly can, and one, how can we get the water in these lakes as clean as we can, and also not be putting poison and chemicals into water that is places that we recreate on, we get water supply from, we eat fish and waterfowl that inhabit those waters. So and just the water quality aspect alone that comes from the current aquatic plant management, it's something that every time we do one of these, we get comments on that. As fishermen and hunters, Daniel and I and many of our friends recognize the importance of that issue, and we need to really see a massive reform on aquatic plant management throughout the state of Florida. And I know that you've identified that and been championing that as well.
Yeah, look, now anybody that handles these chemicals, aquathol, endothol, glyphosate, they'll tell you that the way that you mix them absolutely matters. And there's truth in that, just like any concentrate that you mix up in your kitchen or somewhere else. This is Brian Mast's opinion. I think we need to go out there and manage the environment of Florida in this way. I got a very simple way to look at it that's not the most scientific, but it's scientific in the Mast house. And that's this. In a little while, my 4 kids are going to get into a bathtub. And that's what drives my water policy in my mind. If I wouldn't put something in the bathtub with one of my 4 children, then I don't want it in Lake Okeechobee or the Kissimmee or the Caloosahatchee or the St. Lucie or the Everglades or anywhere else. And that's the way that I look at it in my mind. And that's no doubt that's easier said than done, because there are things that we need to try to go out there and control, invasive species and things like that. But some of these chemicals, if you drink them, now I'm talking about in concentrate, right? But if you drink them, you're going to go blind, or you're going to die, or your liver's going to stop working, or you need to it's advised that you wear a rubber apron and gloves to deal with these chemicals, or you name it, the host of hazards across the board that you could list off just by reading one of the bottles of any one of those things should beg the question to you, do I want that in my drinking water supply, or a water body that is my backup drinking water supply, or a place that I'm going to eat a fish out of, or a place that I need to go work on a boat dock, or that I just want to see my kids swimming in because it's hot in Florida? You name it, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And,
Yeah.
and there's so many, the way I look at it is, there gets to a point that is the effort that is being used to, tackle a problem like non-native plants in our water bodies worse than the problem in the first place. And I think there has to be some kind of a balance there. Obviously, you can't let invasive species completely choke out and the conveyance structures and stuff like that. But there's other ways to address it, and also looking at maybe having some of these plants in these waters can actually benefit in the form of habitat and nutrient uptake. What we know is, and we've seen it as duck hunters on Okeechobee and Kissimmee and Istapoga, is when you go and you have a massive area of non-native plants and they're treated chemically, you have this massive die-off, and it turns into this huge area of floating, decomposing muck, which then, take the chemical out of the equation, you now have this massive muck pile of organics that decomposes, that one, reintroduces the nutrients that are sequestered in those plants when they were alive. Two, then settles, creating muck layers on the bottom, and if it settles on top of, natural grasses like the eelgrass or shrimp grass, it's no different than if you cut your yard and it's really long and you left the clippings lay on top of it, it kills the grass underneath. And then all that muck is down there on the bottom. So when we get winds and wave action, it stirs it up, creates turbidity, blocks out photosynthesis. So there's this chain reaction that happens as a result of chemical treatment that drastically degrades water quality, that leads to other problems. And we need to look at how that's happening at one agency, and meanwhile how other agencies are working on how do we remove nutrients from the water, or how do we clean the water. Every agency, no agency's actions should be negatively impacting the actions or intent of another agency. We need to kind of get our arms. Yeah, the right hand needs to know what the left hand is doing. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, the bottom line with this one is what we're doing right now is not working. I mean, you've got all these bass fishermen on Lake Okeechobee that are absolutely up in arms, rightfully so, over this. They've seen firsthand being out there, 5, 6, 7 days a week, day in, day out, witnessing this. They're throwing a red flag on it. They're documenting this destruction. They have that historical context of what things used to be like. It's not working. And I was totally shocked, but I mean, we had some people, and there's some of the same ones that are, nonstop defending the sugar industry, no matter what, going on there saying, oh, if you don't spray this stuff, then you're going to have all these weeds growing. It's going to cause problems. It's like, all right, if we can decades ago put a man on the moon, we can build skyscrapers in New York City and, all these other cities all over the place. Even bigger mind bender for me is that we've got 3 people in 3 different locations streaming with Wi-Fi and internet and Zoom and all kinds of stuff that just even like when I was a freshman in high school, you couldn't text anybody a picture. And now we've got a real time, 3 different people, 3 different locations working together to solve a problem. And we've already reached, hold on, let me get a live count on this. We have already reached in less than an hour, we've had at least 100 people at a time watching this the whole time. We have reached, now my computer's not going to load as I'm bragging about technology, 15,000 people just since this video has started. So you're telling me we can do all these different things, reach 15,000 people in 1 hour, live stream technology, but we can't figure out how to stop a weed from growing in a pond? I mean, maybe I'm not the one. I mean, I didn't make it through college, but I've saw several scientists popped on here, since we've been talking about this. Are you trying to tell me that scientists couldn't figure out something better? And maybe
Well,
stopping spraying this afternoon isn't going to get us there, but we can definitely all agree that if we set our minds to finding better ways to doing this, we can make that happen. This is absolutely not rocket science. People that put intentional speed bumps up for political reasons, they do it. There's money to be made on it. I'm sure the companies are spraying chemicals and making the chemicals. They probably got a lot to win on this. But when it's same thing with water management. When we're all losing, then it's not working, and we got to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is you do have folks that are operating under the mandate that the state of Florida asked them to operate under, right? I don't necessarily point for myself the finger at the folks that are out there administering the contract, unless they're out there trying to spray something down the throat of a manatee or something. They're operating under what the state of Florida said. Please go out and do this. And you have had things, happen in history, believe it or not, where government got it wrong. I know that's really hard to believe, but it has happened, and this is one of those things I think we'll look back on and say, people were talking about it, and we should have done it better. We could have done it better, even if it means the state spends a little bit more money to do it in one pot than another. Let's keep this environment of Florida pristine. The reason that people come here and recreate here and vacation here and do everything else here, it's because of its beauty. It's not because it's an ugly place. It's not because they can't go outside. It's not because they want to go see toxic algal blooms, or because they don't want to see ducks, or they don't want to catch a tarpon, or they don't want to see the Everglades. It's because they want to see all these things. They want to see beautiful beaches. They want to see the sand pristine. They want to see the water look Bahama blue. These are the things they want to see, and we got to keep it that way. It's incumbent upon us to do it, not just because of people visiting, but it's the right thing.
Yep, absolutely. And
100%.
With all of these problems that we talk about, a lot of times it's just we need to start with what the end goal is and work backwards. And I think the spraying issue is one of those things. Does the ideal lake look like a clean, open body of water with nothing in it, or does it look like something else? And so that's it. And we could go down that road for hours and hours. That's a conversation we're going to have at another time on another one of these happy hours. But we wanted to bring it up because it is, no matter what, whenever we talk about water quality, aquatic plant management is a topic that comes up. And I know that that's something you're passionate about. So I definitely wanted to touch on it briefly. But I think that the critical time is of the essence kind of issue right now is the shenanigans going on with the savings clause and the Lake Okeechobee Regulation Schedule and WRDA and all that. And I think that was the main thing we wanted to have you come on here and explain. And I think you've done certainly a much better job than Daniel and I could have done explaining that. So we really appreciate it.
Happy to.
Yeah, it's great to have your perspective. I mean, the operations thing is something that, I think of any organization or individual or elected official, you've really been the very tip of that spear. I know you identified that early on, and have just been absolutely relentless in this. So we really appreciate it, and the fact that you were able to see this and see it as a threat. I mean, this is something that's it's funny how one sentence written in some kind of BS lawyer talk that makes no sense to anybody else can even be contemplated and even be allowed to put into legislation, especially during a global pandemic, that could have so much impact on every single one of our lives, our businesses, our futures. I can't thank you enough for speaking up on this issue and for coming here today to educate everybody on all these issues. Because this is, I said it a couple times before, I'm gonna say it again, this is probably the number one thing that we've had to, really call our members to arms on since we started Captains for Clean Water. I mean, this is huge.
Their sentence should say, please ignore the science and the ramifications of water management for the last 20 years and revert back to what had failed before. That's essentially what they're asking for. I'd make one other quick important point here. Just think about anybody as a taxpayer out there. Anybody that's a taxpayer, right? You have infrastructure projects that cost billions of dollars to go out there and build. And then you have management changes that don't cost a dollar and potentially don't affect anybody adversely, right? So let's look again to last summer. This will be my last point. We had the Corps of Engineers worked to lower the levels of Lake Okeechobee on purpose, regardless of what anybody says. The Corps says that they tried their best to bring that lake lower to prepare for hurricane season, to protect the dike and to protect the estuaries and the communities surrounding, right? Everybody got the water that they needed. We didn't have to wait 10 years to build something, and we didn't have to ask for $10 billion of money from the taxpayer's pocket to go out there and build it. It was a change in management that didn't cost a dollar. And, I say it didn't cost a dollar, but how do you put a price tag on something that doesn't cost a dollar and has that much benefit?
Yeah.
Yep. Well said. So, everybody watching, we're gonna let the congressman run here in a minute and get to his family and dinner. But thank you all for tuning in. First and foremost, Congressman Mast, thank you for taking time out of your evening away from your family to join us here. I think this conversation's been extremely beneficial to explain the situation of what's going on. Now, all we ask is that all of you watching, go on the link there on the comments page, take action. It takes 30 seconds, but more than that, invite 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 of your friends to do the same thing. This is one of those times where people always ask, what can we do? This is what you can do. This is when your voice is absolutely, do not underestimate the importance of your voice in this situation. Take the couple minutes, make it a point every day to invite your friends to take part in this. And hopefully we can stop this before it gets any worse. Thank you all for tuning in. Congressman Mast, again, thank you so much for taking the time to spend your evening with us. We really appreciate it.
And I just want to say one more thing before we log off here. I've had very little time in the last 4 years, nor has Chris, to get out on the water and fish. But our water over here on the West Coast looks better than I've seen probably in my life right now. And, if you have an opportunity, no matter what it is, whether it's, to drive to the beach and take a look, social distance, whatever you need to do, stay safe, but whatever you can do to just go and really experience that right now, do it. It's worth it. I promise. Watch the sunset over the bay, go see the sunrise over the beach in the morning, take your kids out and go fishing. I've had a great time pulling on some tarpon and watching some of my friends and our team at Captains pulling on some the last few days. Our fishing guides out there are really struggling. They got hit harder than anybody I know from this coronavirus crisis. This is the peak of their season, and I've seen a ton of them tuning in tonight. Randall Marsh.
Captain Pat Ewald, your buddy, Congressman Mast, he was tuned in. He says hi.
Yeah,
I heard some familiar names out there.
Yeah, John Landry is on here, Bill Hammond, Benny Blanco, Chris Peterson from Hells Bay Boat Works. He's not a guide, but he builds boats for everybody. I can't see the whole list on here, but I saw him the whole time coming in. A bunch of fishing guides on here. The reason they're tuning into this is because they're struggling right now. They're not running charters because of this. So if you do have a couple extra dollars laying around, book your charter in advance. Captain Bill Hammond, I saw was on here, and his wife Angela. Please, book your charter for later this year if you can. It's a worthwhile experience to get out there and see it, to feel it, to be a part of this thing that we're fighting for so hard, because it makes you want to fight harder. The other day, I actually went out with one of my old clients and Captain John Landry, and I got to catch my first tarpon of the year, and it kicked my ass. A little out of shape right now, sitting in the office all the time and driving around in the truck. But there's a moment when you hook a tarpon when nothing else really seems to matter. And I wouldn't want, that to be taken away from anybody. That's something that we all have to experience. Everybody on our team at Captains for Clean Water this year is going to catch a tarpon. We're going to make sure of that. And I would encourage, everybody else, whether you have the opportunity to go out there, catch that tarpon, or just go out there and see that sunrise, that sunset. It will make you want to fight so much harder for this resource. It's the reason why Florida is what it is, and we need to keep it that way. And literally 1 minute, you can spend 1 minute online and do something that's going to make a significant difference. Hit the share button, go on there, send the email to your policymaker. Do it. Don't think about it. Don't put it off to later. Do it right now. We've already had almost 5,000 people do it. Be the next one and get 100 of your friends, as many as you possibly can, to weigh on this. This is important. Thank you, Congressman Mast. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in tonight. This is a great conversation, and don't forget about this. Thank you all.
Later.
Thank you.